Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Good morning, everybody. Okay, ready to get the correct buttons pressed? Okay. Woo! Another close call this morning. No squirrels out. The squirrel update is the squirrel never made it to the bird feeder yesterday, and I got my picture of the two birds that were required, which my son totally took, as you'll recall. Oh, look, I think there's a new species there. What are we seeing, by the way? We're seeing what looked to be, in case you're wondering, juncos. I never heard of juncos, but you see them all over the place. And chickadees. I don't know whether they're black-capped chickadees or Carolina chickadees. You tell me. I'm told that the black-capped would be wintering in this area at this time. But then again, I don't know. And I don't care. And I think he can probably get away with just saying it's a chickadee. Anyway, we're ready to go. The show is on. I may once again be distracted by squirrels. You will now know why we usually keep the window shade down right next to my my broadcasting spot. I'm that easily distracted. Whew! But it's an exciting Wild Kingdom situation out there today. And I don't just mean at the bird feeder, of course. We're also talking about, well, everything there is going on. I guess is it CPAC Day today? There's a lot of chatter about CPAC, and I'm just watching here now Igor Bobic saying CPAC 2017 kicking off with a Jimi Hendrix rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner, which used to be unpatriotic and too hippie-ish to be contemplated, but we're alt and edgy now. I guess that's about it. Well, plenty happening this morning, lots of chatter. I just want to note a couple of things for the record here, and of course we have Greg Dworkin joining us for the Thursday appearance. Our Monday, Wednesday, Thursday schedule, kind of funky. It's edgy. It's an alt schedule, you see. We're trying everything. And I was just wondering about a few things that I saw flying around this morning. Brad Jaffe, I saw tweeting this morning, NBC News, senior news editor, pointing out that Congressman Louis Gohmert of Texas says he won't hold a town hall because of violent paid protesters, and he invokes Gabby Giffords getting shot as a part of his excuse, I guess. He's got a long and looks to be rather rambling letter, but it looks to be long, let's say. And I know that Louis Gohmert wrote it, so I'm guessing that it's rambling. But the highlighted portion here says, unfortunately at this time, there are groups from the more violent strains of the leftist ideology, some even being paid, who are preying on public town halls to wreak havoc and threaten public safety. Threats are nothing new to me, and I have gotten my share as a fellow judge. Well, actually, a felony judge, I'm sorry. However, the House Sergeant at Arms advised us after Congresswoman Gabby Giffords was shot at a public appearance that civilian attendees at congressional public events stand the most chance of being harmed or killed, just as happened there. So it's not him. He's not worried about being shot. He's worried about you being shot as a bystander to the alleged or the attempt at attacking him. So he's only got you in mind. That's why there will be no town meetings with Louis Gohmert. I just wondered why all the Texas open carriers wouldn't prevent such violence, though. I'm just a little bit curious about that. I thought that everybody going about armed would make the chances of such an attack near zero. But then again, as I've always warned, maybe Louis right here, and having Texas open carriers on hand to provide civilian security at such an event would only end up seeing bystanders get shot, either by accident, entirely by accident, just a gun going off in somebody's holster or whatnot, or them, well, more likely with them fiddling around with it. Just trying to make sure it fits correctly in the holster. But I guess, there's also, of course, the chance that somebody who comes as an attacker freaks out all the open carriers, and everybody shoots in 18 different directions, and who knows who gets shot in that situation. All right. Well, anyway, apparently that's the excuse that Louis Gohmert is going with, just to keep you up to date on things like that. Let's see. Other questions that have arisen out of the morning's tweetings will no doubt follow, because Daily Kos Radio is, in fact, live right now, as we find out via tweet from Bill in Portland, Maine. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman. I will be previewing the CPAC convention by flinging poo at a ceiling fan set to high. And I think we're all set to high this morning, really, when you get right down to it, or we ought to be, at any rate. CPAC, wow. Well, I don't usually watch, but it's something you can't avoid watching vicariously if you're watching Twitter today. So all the crazy will no doubt be broadcast, and from time to time we'll break in with news of exactly who's craziest at what particular time. And Greg Dworkin here with the morning roundup of pre-CPAC crazy, which will only be taken to the next level, I'm sure, in the next hour or so. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning. I am so glad that I don't have to look at CPAC, and that maybe it'll happen after the show and other people will take care of it.
Yeah. Well, and you don't even have to come back tomorrow to deal with the...
That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's a perfect schedule. I really don't want to deal with them at all if I don't have to. Okay. Bunch of nutcases. But, it's interesting in terms of the development of the conservative movement. And, of course, this goes back to some of the stuff that we've been talking about. CPAC is really so far out there that they would even consider to invite Milo in the first place. I mean, it's now about celebrity who will come and can they get cameras there. But its influence and meaning for the conservative movement at this particular point in time, I think, is somewhere between useless and who cares.
Well, I hope so. I note that Media Matters is tweeting around. I guess they've made some little bits of tweetable art to help promote the conference. This one has a sort of I don't know. I mean, this is almost like Soviet-style tribute to Andrew Breitbart himself, the dead one, here just being tweeted around, and the photography and the layout, and I mean, it's a horrible photograph, really, but I guess it's supposed to give him gravitas in some way. It's black and white.
Well, let's talk about something more important.
All right.
Which is any topic you'd like to pick, but
okay.
Is talk about the town halls. I just sent you a Storify that I made the other day, and it was just a very short collection of some of the tweets around the individual town halls. Every time you looked, it was either some guy not showing up like Gohmert,
right,
or some guy showing up and just getting hammered by the audience. And although there were a series of these that I saw, which included Mitch McConnell, and which included a whole bunch of other people, probably the hardest I saw hit was Tom Cotton. I don't know if you catch.
I did. You sent me a special delivery there, and I took a look.
I just want to make sure you saw it and heard it.
Tom Cotton deserves to be hit the hardest on a lot of subjects. So okay, I did see this one. This was really overwrought emotionally, no doubt.
Yes.
Everybody's. It's really the listening thing.
Yeah. So basically, Cotton's at this Arkansas town hall, and a lady stands up and says, listen, my Obamacare and my Medicare, all of my insurance, everything I have is just vastly important. And right now, with the current Obamacare situation I have, I'm paying $39 a month for me and $29 a month for my dying husband. And, Senator, I just want to know, what kind of insurance do you have?
Yeah.
Ask that, and for a moment you can hear a pin drop in this raucous auditorium, and then everybody erupts and cheers. Cotton has to stand there on the stage and take all this for like 20 minutes or longer. And that's happening in town halls all over the country. And I just really wonder how they react to it.
Well, it's not unusual, of course, to be confronted at a town hall meeting. What's unusual, of course, is here the size of the crowds and
right.
the
and the topic.
Yeah, the topic and the demonstrative raucousness of the crowd in support. I mean, people get tough questions all the time. You don't usually get the whole crowd erupting in cheers after such a thing.
Right. And those are really tough questions. And it's interesting because, for example, with Jason Chaffetz.
That guy again.
Chaffetz, back in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
The chant there was, do your job.
Right.
In some of these other ones, it's, you work for us. And each time I'm seeing one of these, and I originally, started to describe these, it is so much involved around healthcare. The idea that they are going to take healthcare away from people and folks are going to sort of ignore that because the Republicans said it's okay is one of the most ludicrous things I could see. And how are they going to go back to Washington after this and say, oh, well, it doesn't matter? They can claim to the media, and this is part of the fun, they can claim to the media that these are all paid protesters. But you got little old ladies there. Yeah. The same kind that would be at the book sale at the library, or would be the people who do the voting organization. They're the people that sign you in when you go vote. Mm-hmm. You know who those people are. So you have these little old ladies who are at these meetings with signs saying, "I am not a paid protester," or telling the representative, I live here, I'm your constituent, I am not a paid protester. That's like the opening thing that people say now because the Republicans were dumb enough to bring it up and make it an issue.
Yes. Now, I'm looking forward to...
because this is like really important stuff. This is true local organizing.
Yeah.
And making it work.
I'm looking forward to the media sort of remembering what they did last week. On this. I read something this morning on Twitter. Teresa Kopich, who I think a lot of us are familiar with follow on Twitter, but just pointing out, again, this is how these kind of lies work. She says, my husband, a college professor, asks me if there's any evidence that protesters are paid. The press needs to stop repeating this. And this is shaping up exactly in the same way as the claim about illegal votes being cast. The President and every Republican who was willing to do this on television began making these claims about millions of illegal votes. And it took a couple days for the press to realize we got to stop just saying, well, he said this, so I'm reporting it. We got to start saying, there's no evidence for this. You need to stop saying it. And it worked very well. And they did, for the most part, stop saying it, or it became too embarrassing to continue.
Well, they even had a better one.
Yeah, last week they were banning people from shows over this, and it's an easy play. It's the same one, guys.
It is, but they had even a better one because then they started adding, we talked to everybody. I couldn't find anybody who was a paid protester. I talked to a lot of people who weren't. And when you put that kind of information out there, it's very different than repeating the lie.
Yes, well, hopefully they'll be able to get to the same result with this one as they did with the illegal voters.
Yes.
They haven't abandoned it entirely, but that's not what they're doing on TV anymore. Maybe because they have this to turn to, but
you have live video, right?
Yes.
You have live video. You're not going to bother with the somebody said that there were paid protesters there, like Louis Gohmert. You have live video. You're going to go with the live video. That is really dramatic stuff. Let me read some of the things in the brief sets of tweets that we had here.
Okay.
This is Matt McDermott. Town hall scenes from Colorado, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Maryland tonight, where voters showed up, but GOP congressmen were no-shows. Brad Jeffy again. Angry constituents confront Chuck Grassley in Iowa. If it wasn't for Obamacare, we wouldn't be able to afford insurance. Brad Jeffy again. Angry constituent gives Mitch McConnell the what for, and McConnell says, listen, we won, and so therefore we get to make the rules. That's not the exact quote, but it's the exact quote.
All right.
I don't know if you saw that one, but it was just amazing. McConnell said, look, free speech, you're allowed to get up and say whatever you want, but we won, and we're going to set the rules. That's what happens when you win. When you win, you decide what happens. When you lose, you don't. So sit down and shut up. I added that. He didn't say that. But that was a message to his constituents, and I think that the constituents there wanted to strangle him when he said that.
Yeah. And it's hard to get your hand around that neck.
Yeah, crowd erupts at Joni Ernst event in rural Iowa. Mm-hmm. Crowd asked Representative Steve Womack in Arkansas to investigate Trump and Russia. That was a good one.
Yeah.
Womack sits there and says, you guys, you're all here. You just want to investigate everybody. That's a direct quote. You guys just want to investigate everybody. And some guy stands up and says, listen, Benghazi, 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 Benghazi. How much money did you waste on Benghazi? Why don't you just investigate a little bit of Trump? And the audience explodes with applause.
Well, certainly well worth pointing out. I mean, I don't understand how anybody could have missed the Benghazi thing.
Right, and I'm just doing this, you look for it. It's 1, it's 2, it's 3, it's 20. It's everywhere. Representative Buddy Carter, people who couldn't get in are outside yelling, you work for us. Why didn't you let us in? 100 show up for a raucous town hall with a freshman GOP representative in Virginia. Congressman takes tough crowd at this town hall today, tries to defend Donald Trump. Doesn't work. 18,000 call into Illinois GOP congressman's phone town hall because he was afraid to show up. Just over and over and over again. This is a big deal. This is part of the Indivisible movement, which is recommending that you do things locally. That's an organizing tactic that should work. And the Indivisible organization, we talked about this the other day, is recommending that you get up there and say no on Obamacare, worry about the positive stuff later, but say no. Now, on that idea, we talked on the show the other day about the post that I had done, Memo to the Resistance, Let's Play Think Like a Strategist. We talked about voter ID the Virginia way. We talked about not pushing impeachment too hard before the facts get ahead of us. And we talked about looking at border security. Those are the 3 things we thought would appeal to center-right voters for 2018. And I just have to tell you, I actually had some real-time conversation with people over the course of yesterday after the show. They all agreed. I mean, this is something I think resonates with them. Somebody said to me, I didn't vote for Trump. I'm not thrilled with what the Democrats have, but could you please just stop talking about impeachment? It makes you sound crazy. Okay, all right. I hear you. I'm just, reporting it back. It was my impression. I'm getting that impression from other people. I understand that we have grounds to think he deserves it. But, if you want to tell me that you want to build a case for it, fine. Just don't tell me he needs to be because you don't have the facts yet. You could say this Russia thing is so big, and it is, that it should not be distracted by anything that we're talking about here, and that's going to lead to some, and I'll buy that. But, right. Step by step. This is one of those things you can't skip to step 10. You got to go 2 through 9 on this one.
So you claim.
So I say.
Okay.
David is not convinced, but you know what? It'll play out however it plays out.
Although I will say I think things are different this time around than they were in the Bush situation in this respect. Simply that at the time during the Bush administration, when people began bringing the topic up, it was a taboo topic as well, and it was something that you can't mention it in public. It's so amazingly rare and outrageous to even contemplate that.
Right.
Yeah, that was holding things up. This, I think, impeachment is already on everyone's lips, and I don't need to.
First thing we said when he was elected, but now you need the proof.
Right. And so it's fine. Absolutely. Sometimes you have to wait for these things to play out and for other people to catch up. But at least this time, I don't feel that it's as imperative to say the word from time to time simply because people haven't heard it in 20 years or whatever it is.
Right, exactly. You don't have to get people used to listening to you. You don't have to move the Overton window all the way to the side where people now get used to it so that when you do say it, they're not freaked out. Yes. Nobody's freaked out by it. The question is it relevant?
Yes.
Very different than the Bush years.
Okay. Well, there's a good way to disagree. Easy.
So anyway, there's that. I think the other thing that happened that I think is pretty big, pretty big, is the elevation of Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster to the National Security Advisor. We talked about this yesterday. Big story in the New York Times today. McMaster may reorganize Trump's foreign policy team once again with, and I don't know if we actually spoke about this particular story yesterday. You did a great job with the Comey letter after I got off the show. I noticed after I went back and listened, and I really enjoyed that part. But the thing about the McMaster thing is it does have the potential of pushing Stephen K. Bannon away from a major role in shaping foreign policy. And if that's the case, and if that happens, it's good. Lawrence Tribe, who is no friend of the Trumps, says, must give credit when credit is due. Flynn to McMaster is a hugely reassuring move by Trump, one of the first. That is to say, he didn't replace Flynn with a Rudy Giuliani or some other nutcase, or a Louis Gohmert. McMaster is not in that category, as we talked about yesterday. And so good story about that. And I think that does need to play out. We need to see what happens to KT McFarland, whether he has the ability to do his own staffing.
Right. I heard that was supposed to be a
litmus test of kinds.
Stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's true. And the other place to watch is State, where Tillerson has the unique situation where he could be obnoxious and awful and marginalized, so who cares? Like most of the rest of the cabinet in the Trump administration. But events may wind up forcing the cabinet to be real cabinet members, which is kind of interesting. It almost happened the other day with Jeff Sessions and Betsy DeVos in the LGBTQ removal of Obama principles.
Right.
Because DeVos wanted to leave them, and Sessions said no, he wanted to push them, and DeVos said no, I want to leave them. And it turns out, because it's for schools, you need the sign-off of both cabinet members. Sessions went to Trump, convinced Trump to lean on DeVos, and so that happened. She backed off, and it got done. But it was not simple. And Trump actually had to do what he loves to do, which is not make any decisions on his own in terms of prep work or anything. Just go in there at the end and say, okay, yes, you, no, you. Right. And that's what he does. That's about the level of his management skills. Unfortunately, that leaves Sessions in charge and, reinforces the fact that every possible bad thing we thought about Jeff Sessions so far is turning out to be true. So you have that. But at least you have McMaster as a counterweight on the other side with the hope that the other generals will, provide something to what's turning out to be the Bannon, Sessions axis. And it does look like Kellyanne Conway, professional weasel, is getting squeezed out.
Yeah, that's good.
You don't see her anymore. She's not on the shows. They won't take her, and the Trump White House is not offering her.
It says here from Politico that she says, asked about her TV absence. She says she had family commitments. There's family considerations. So you need to spend more time with her family.
Yeah, I'd love to see her spend more time with her family altogether, for the next 4 years.
Fantastic. And maybe even in a different city. Might be a good idea. I was struck by that comment mostly because that used to be the reason, that was the reason she used to give about why women couldn't and shouldn't work in the White House. That they would be drawn away by family too often.
Because, look, I'm going to prove the point, so I'm going to, recuse myself.
Exactly right. She's right about one thing. She should not be in the White House.
Yeah. Hey, did you see the Newsweek story about Sebastian Gorka?
I have seen that it exists. I have not yet read it.
I just sent it to you. Exclusive. Listen to controversial White House terrorism advisor Sebastian Gorka's angry call to a critic.
That's why I haven't seen it. It's a hearing thing.
Yeah. But there's a story that goes with it, so you could read it if you want to.
Oh, all right.
But I'm just, filling in the whole everybody around Trump is awful. And so if you want to know who he is, look who he walks with.
Many articles. Yesterday was a big day for Sebastian Gorka getting bashed. Lots of articles about how he's just generally not considered to be an actual expert in national security or anything really, for that matter, like remembering to take his gun out of his bag at the airport. But
for example.
Yes. But he's, I think I saw one of the titles was that he's widely reviled, I think, in his field. He's apparently an academic, but I mean, he's the purest kind of academic. His academic work is all about radical Islamic terrorism. He speaks no Arabic, never lived in an Arabic or even.
In other words, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, he's read a lot of comic books about terrorism.
Right. Let me throw in a couple of tweets here as people listen, and we want to acknowledge and thank them. Parlio says, impeachment is too surgical, need to chain every Republican post holder to this mess and drag them all down. This is true. Anybody who does not denounce Trump is associated with Trump. True. Even if you like them otherwise. And I've got a whole bunch of people I follow and follow me in my Twitter feed, and every time I happen to run into one of them, it's, dude, if you don't distance yourself now, you own him. Where is your red line? What does he have to do in order to get rid of him? We know what Milo's is now. We talked about that yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
It's pedophilia. But what does Trump have to do for you to say, okay, I'm out? Because there's lots of people that don't want to have anything to do with him, including those that were asked to be his national security advisor. Unlike them, active general has to sort of do what the commander-in-chief says. But still, where's your red line? And make sure that every Republican is going to be associated with this. It's interesting when you look at it that way, because when you turn about and look at what Congress is doing, what are they actually going to get accomplished, do you think? Their big thing was Obamacare. That's not going anywhere.
Right.
It's more likely to be left alone than it is to be repealed at this point. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but if you look at the juggling odds and then you add in these town halls we were just talking about, how are they going to rush to repeal it? I just don't get it. I don't see it. At the same time, what are they accomplishing? Where's the legislation?
Oh, there isn't any. The only thing they're able to do is Congressional Review Act work.
Right. And confirmation stuff on the Senate side.
And
so pretty fascinating things. You and Joan watching Congress, tell us what they're doing because
Nothing.
we ain't seeing it.
No, nothing's happening. They're on. Well, first of all, of course, they're in recess now. But
right. But I mean, in terms
nothing.
of stuff lined up and promises made, committees working, that sort of thing. No. Empires rising and falling, fortunes made. Where is it?
It is not there.
It is not there. Here's another one from Mad Hatter. And of course, I'm reading this, so you'll see why. Dem from Connecticut is right. Steps 2 through 9 must be followed for impeachment talk. Everything must be laid out clearly. Now, I'm not reading all the ones that say that I'm wrong because that's not as much fun, but also because I'm not seeing them.
They're all hidden. Hiding.
I've already blocked all those people, so you can't see them.
Yes, those are muted. It depends who you're talking to, largely. I mean, there certainly will be people who think that they have gone through steps 2 through 9 on their own anyway. Mm-hmm. But and certainly in Congress, as a procedural matter, steps 2 through 9 would have to be followed. No doubt about that.
That's what I'm saying here. And in fact, because that's the practical way to do it, it's what Congress thinks, not what we guys think.
Yes. Of course, Congress doesn't think it until we think it for them. And then...
Congress isn't going to think it until we unelect them, and so that's why I think it's a 2018 day after kind of thing.
It may be, but there will certainly be people...
Can you see a path otherwise? Honestly?
Impeachment?
Yeah.
I would think Trump would have to beat people over the head.
He'd really have to have something in the Russia story that is such a hard smoking gun kind of proof, as Howard Baker used to say. Mm-hmm. That they would be forced to do it, right? I mean, it would take something like
Congress, the only removal possibility I see is them becoming convinced that, really, the only thing I can think of is for them to remove him under the 25th Amendment, but on the premise that he's a fantastic guy and an American hero, but he's ill.
Yeah.
And through no fault of his own, as fantastic as he is and as much as I support him,
yeah, you can't have ill people do that.
Recover.
Yep. So, yeah, all right, but until you see that, that's where it is. So we have all of those different pieces there, and I think that when you put it together as a whole, this is not an administration that is forging ahead with a well-oiled machine, to use a phrase that they tried to use and everybody laughed at.
Yes.
That is on its way to doing dire things, partly because of incompetence, partly because of mismanagement, not because they don't want to. But at least for the moment, that seems to be stable. I think the biggest hits we're taking right now, and we will take hits from the feds, but right now I think the biggest hits we're taking is at state level. Iowa pulling collective bargaining and those sorts of things. So we'll have to keep an eye on those two.
All right.
Well, let's assign those to our listeners so you and I don't have to do it.
Mad Hatter, that's you.
Okay, everybody pick a state and see what's going on in the state and use the KITM hashtag and tell us what's going on so that we don't have to do it.
As a matter of fact, use the KITM hashtag to tell me that you've recorded your remarks on that subject and you're sending it to us. We're going to try and expand our state correspondent network. And,
that would be a fantastic thing.
Quite honestly, if you don't have any idea what's going on in your state, that's okay. Tell me what's going on in your head. That's fine.
Hey, we know a couple of good people from Colorado who could do that.
Yes, and they've offered to do so, and so we'll be able to add that to our roundup, I hope. And really, if you're not into your state's politics or nothing's happening in your state politics, that doesn't matter. Your commentary on national politics, local politics for that matter, also welcome.
Right, and you don't need to call in, but if you feel like, just putting it on the hashtag KITM that them from Connecticut is right and Armando's wrong, just go right ahead.
Oh, yeah, that's totally allowed.
Totally
allowed. There should be a hashtag for that.
Hashtag Armando is wrong. So, we can do that.
Yeah.
But again, that to me is the big picture that we're seeing this morning.
Okay.
So, what do we have polling-wise? This Aaron Blake piece is very good. President Trump is losing his war with the media. It's pretty clear that President Trump is doing
war loser.
What he's doing by going after the media, and everybody understands he's playing to his base and all that. But a new Q poll came out, Quinnipiac. President Trump versus the media, who is trusted more? News media 52, President Trump 37.
Oh,
that's a pretty big jump there.
Yeah, for the guy who campaigned and allegedly won on the press is terrible.
Exactly. That is the first story I have on your list. If you want to follow along,
popular vote too.
It'll be on Scott Anderson's summary, I'm sure. But even 23% of Republicans say Trump is mistreating the media, and independents disapprove 59-35. That 23% of Republicans is our target. It matches the 22% of conditionals that we've identified in CBS YouGov polling. And it's something that, gives us a little bit of a wedge. Remember, when we first talked about this, about shared values, one of the things that we talked about is honesty. Well, here's an example where some Republicans, maybe a quarter of Republicans, realize that Trump isn't honest. There's some common ground you could talk about. The other thing is, when people say they don't like media, that's like saying you don't like Congress, but you keep reelecting your own congressman.
Yes.
I hate media. What about the Washington Post? Well, they're good. I subscribe. Well, I hate media. Well, what about the New York Times? Well, I subscribe there too. What do you mean by media? I hate CNN. Okay, I'm there with you. They have Jeffrey Lord.
Okay.
But not the same thing. Or what about that? Well, I hate Fox. They're media. Okay, fine. But, that doesn't mean overall generically that when you look at what they say about media, it doesn't, drill down to the individual outlet that we're talking about. And so one has to keep that in mind. Trump is simply not winning this argument.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. I don't mind if he loses.
And, that's the final piece there, I think, that we again need to do this. We talked about this yesterday with Seth Maskett, and it's very important. It's fine if you want to go look at Trump voters and interview Trump voters and ask Trump voters what they think. But they're only about a quarter of the population. So it might be a good idea to also ask what the non-Trump voters think, the other 75%. And that would be useful. So that's my advice. If you're doing a story, don't waste our time with, I found another Trump voter at a rally who still supports Trump. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. What about the person who reluctantly decided to vote for Trump in the last 3 days? How about that person? Go tell us what that person is doing, and people like him. That would be useful.
Yes.
And if you're not sure, why don't you go to the town halls and start interviewing people and tell us what they think?
Right.
That'd be a lot more interesting.
That's a good question. I have not yet. I've seen lots of coverage of the town halls, no doubt about that.
Yeah, where somebody stands up and says it at the town hall. Why aren't you interviewing people after?
That's a good question. I mean, it's not enough just to say, well, we were there and we got this video from somebody.
Yeah, let's go find a Trump voter who's here.
Yeah. Never any. I'm waiting for the kind of reach out and understand these angry people at town halls pieces.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they're happening. I think they're happening on the same.
You got lots of material. You don't even have to travel.
Chris
They're happening
Arnett
in every state.
Yeah. Are they? I imagine they're happening in small town America, with white picket fences and a single marquee movie theater. Woo, majestic, right? Anyway, yes, they are happening out there, and I don't know. So far, we haven't gotten those, but I believe that those pieces are in the works. They may take some time to crank out. They are probably pretty time-intensive pieces.
Right.
I guess we could give them that. So you got to the weekend.
You got till tomorrow.
Yeah. All right, tomorrow. That's better.
Yeah.
But yeah, this should be a weekend piece. We should be seeing this in the weekend papers.
Well, today's Thursday. That's when you start seeing the weekend
piece. It is the
piece.
weekend,
So,
right. I cover Congress. What am I talking about? I'm already off. Bye.
So you have that. So I'm going to leave you. I think that's pretty much the summary for this morning.
All right.
I will say that, if I look outside my window, I'm seeing the black-eyed juncos that you described.
Yeah.
I have the titmouse.
Oh,
I have the black-capped chickadees. I'm starting to hear songbirds today, which I didn't hear this week. I haven't seen the finches yet. I'm hoping they come soon.
Yes.
Got blue jays.
Right. Well, I'm looking at all these birds. I got to get a big. I think that we need to make our feeder bigger. The cardinals want to land on this thing, and it's too small.
I love the cardinals. We've had cardinals all winter. I've got at least 3 mating pair in my backyard, and I love watching them against the snow. So they never left. And the other ones that we have a lot of are various and sundry kinds of woodpeckers.
Yes.
I don't know if they're hitting your feeder, but we've had the downy woodpecker. We have flickers. We had the yellow-bellied sapsucker.
Oh, well. What do you call me? I'll tell you. This sounds like a town hall meeting in here all of a sudden.
It does. But, those are the kinds of things that you normally see. And then when you see other birds besides that, the bad part is when you get grackles, because they usually come like 30 at a time.
Oh. Well, we haven't had that. We have the tiny little feeder here, and it's set up for the little, finch-sized guys. So that's what we're getting.
And Abby, the doorbell dog, has already caught her first squirrel of the spring.
Well, and what you do with it?
Well, it was up to me to remove it from her and dispose of it otherwise.
Okay.
But she's very fast, and catching squirrels is not an easy thing, so she's in mid-season form.
Good. Well, it's warm weather, so she will be.
Exactly that. So for those of you who are bird lovers, I'm just giving you a little idea of what we see up here in Connecticut, and, probably David will see something similar. Every once in a while we get something real, like a real treat, the kind of thing you're looking forward to catching with the camera. We get a Baltimore Oriole or something like that. But that's relatively rare. I'm looking also for the red-winged blackbirds. Haven't seen them yet.
No. Okay, yeah, that would be a little later, I think, for us. But I'm not much of a bird expert, although, we're trying our best to identify what's here.
I'm trying to round out the show.
Yeah, this is good. We'll try and get some bigger birds. I think we're going to go with a much more rudimentary feeder, since this only has to last a certain number of days for the project.
Right,
so
exactly.
He's crafted this very intricate feeder, and I think the next one is going to be paper plate on the deck. Okay, it only needs to last a day. If the squirrels get it afterwards, that's fine. But we need some bigger birds here.
Right. Well, speaking of bigger birds, you know what I saw last year, which was just amazing? I had a pileated woodpecker in my backyard, the one that looks like Woody, the giant red one.
That's
it's an enormous bird.
Wow.
And it was in the woods in the back of the house. And it sounded like it was, trying to take our house down. It was so loud. And I looked out, and, the bird is like 2 feet, it's huge. It's enormous. Wow. And you don't see that they come rarely, and it was really nice to see. You get something that size at your feeder, you're in trouble. Of course, you're also in trouble if you get one of those Arabian rocks, the one that's bigger than your house. So, that would be good to take a picture of.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get that.
It's a mythical bird, so you probably won't see many of them, but every once in a while they stop by.
We're a pretty open backyard area, not really much of the woods that we're looking at here. We'd have to travel down the road a little bit and set up there, or over at the grandparents' house, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that'd be interesting. But anyway, so that's a little bit of nature. Spring is coming. The pitchers and catchers have reported. It's all good. Life is good. We still have to deal with Trump, but, take care of yourself, folks, and, look at a little baseball and go out and, do some bird watching, appreciate the songbirds, and, don't get all upset about everything, because we got a long way to go here. We're going to take this step by step, and we're going to work on blocking Steve Bannon. We're going to work on resistance. We're going to work on blocking what happens in Congress with these town halls, preserve Obamacare. We can do this. We're not going to lose everything. So that's my message for this morning. As grumpy and dour as we can be sometimes about the state of the world, there are good things happening, and I just thought I'd leave you with that this week.
All right. We can take that. Thanks very much, and have a great weekend. All
right, and I'll catch up with you on Monday.
Okay. Excellent. Thanks very much. And thanks for opening up the taps here and starting the torrent of information coming in. For our correspondents can't wait, nor should they. Important things are happening all over. But you got some instantaneous response. Mad Hatter wanted us to know they've got a Harris County Democratic Party chair election on March 5th. There have been a lot of stories about the explosion of activity. I think I put one aside. I hope I put one aside about the explosion of activity on the local level at the Democratic Party, and it's been just fantastic. And if you've ever thought about it, like I have, getting involved once again in local politics, now would be the time. There's a lot of newcomers. There's a lot of new excitement. There's going to be a lot of opportunities to elect new leadership. And I'll throw out this caution. Be tolerant of your own fellow Democrats to the extent possible. Jump right in, by all means, into the participation, but wade in slowly when it comes to making decisions about leadership. And recognize that although you might be entirely right that new leadership would be a great idea for the Democratic Party top to bottom, given the results of the last couple elections, really, realize also that there are going to be people who have put in an awful lot of time already and may have begun not all that much longer before you did, but put in a couple of years in the hopes of, yes, moving to new leadership in the near future. But to you, of course, if maybe this is your first time out with a formal party organization, if you arrive with the idea in mind that the leadership needs to be swept out and new leadership brought in order to make change happen, that's generally probably true. Thing to remember may be, let's think a little bit about, well, how old is the leadership here? Are they the same leaders we've been working with for the past 30 years? Or has it been the last 3 to 5 years? Are the current leaders who came in on the promise of let's bring in new leadership and gradually change the party? And is it worth automatically opposing them because they were on hand during the last election? There's going to be a lot of tensions, in other words. And some of them are going to be rationally based, and some of them are going to be personally based, and some of them are going to be irrationally/personally based. And you're going to have to be aware of that. Be aware that you're a newcomer. That doesn't mean sit on your hands. It doesn't mean stay quiet and wait your turn. It means listen as carefully to your fellow Democrats as you do to Republicans that you're looking to take apart, but then do something different with it. You see, we seem to tend to be very attuned to the nuances of what a Republican says because the purpose is taking it apart. It's a lot like family relationships, right? It's very often, if you have kids, you may have noticed, for instance, whether it's you behaving this way toward them toward you, or anybody else in your family. If you ever noticed sometimes, because you feel most comfortable around family members, sometimes you're more willing to let your guard down and speak your mind with them. Sometimes you're rougher, you're tougher on family members than you would ever be on a coworker or a complete stranger, for instance. And we tend to have more patience with them because there are more social barriers we erect between ourselves and others in a less familiar situation. And so the ironic outcome of it all may be that you sometimes are, like we said, tougher on family members and loved ones, close friends, than you would be on anyone else in the world. And I don't know. I just think it's a good lesson to keep in mind if you're going to join up and try and insert yourself into the process. Absolutely, you're right to do so. I demand that you do so. I demand that I do so, which is something I really hate because honestly, I'm just no fan of local politics, but I'm getting the sense that some of this will change now. There are more people who are arriving with at local organizing meetings with an eye towards changing things nationally, but doing their part there at home. I think it could become a much more interesting way of spending your time than it used to be. Let's say that. That's about as vague as possible. All right. We also had mention from Bill in Maine. He says that Mainers are going to vote on expanding Medicaid via the Affordable Care Act in November. I had no idea that was. It's still in the offing to expand Medicaid, so it would be a terrific way of pushing back. If we can make it all the way to November, on the notion that the country is ready for repealing and replacing Obamacare. If the town halls haven't convinced you, maybe a vote will, although Maine, under their wacko governor, has been famous, or the governor himself anyway, has been famously willing to dismiss the will of the voters, as clear as it might have been, just to serve his own ends. All right, let's see. We also have H.D. Gregg, who we used to recognize as Blue DuPage, then Green DuPage, now just plain old H.D. Gregg. That's who I am. Noting Utah constituents saying, guess what? They weren't paid to protest Chaffetz. I don't think anybody has been able to prove that about hardly anybody. And by the way, it would be enormously expensive to fill all these town halls with paid people. I don't know what you're paying. I mean, unless you're paying them a penny a piece, and even so, it would really start to add up after a while. But it's a pretty common accusation, and I'm hopeful that you'll see it dealt with in the same way that we saw the voter fraud claims dealt with too. It's time for members of the press to move on from their first stage of pushback, which I think was correctly noted by Greg, and which I had frankly forgotten about, that they indeed will do, they'll do those stand-up reporting from outside the town hall saying, I didn't find anybody who said they were a paid protester, and I spoke to a lot of people who insisted the first thing to me that they were not. Of course, there's that weird subsection of Trump supporters out there who just simply dismiss that as fake news, but you got to keep saying it and you got to keep pointing it out. And hopefully it will evolve to this next level shortly. All right. Other things being noted on Twitter today that I think are worth commenting on this morning. Let's see. There is the strange, uncalled for, I guess, apparent lie from Trump, the latest, being, in what context did he do this? I don't know. But apparently Trump has been out and about insisting that he has somehow squeezed $1 billion in savings out of Lockheed Martin, I guess. Or is it, well, who's making the new, Boeing, I guess. Boeing is making the new Air Force One. And he's apparently out there insisting that he's been leaning on them to cut the cost because it's out of control. It's out of control. You remember when he was claiming that? He now claims that he's knocked the price down by $1 billion. The Air Force, on the other hand, who's actually responsible for procuring the plane, is, as it says here in Bloomberg, stumped by Trump's claim of $1 billion savings on the jet. They don't know what the hell he's talking about. The cost estimates for a new Air Force One are still being refined. The service, that is the Air Force, will award the next contracts for design and the aircraft by June 30th. So the idea of knocking anything off any price, which doesn't exist, seems a little made up, to say the least. The way it's being reported here at Bloomberg by Anthony Capaccio, the Air Force can't account for the $1 billion in savings that President Donald Trump said he's negotiated for the program to develop, purchase, and operate 2 new Boeing company jets to serve as Air Force One. To my knowledge, I have not been told we have that information. Colonel Pat Ryder, an Air Force spokesman, told reporters Wednesday when asked how Trump had managed to reduce the price for a new presidential plane. I refer you to the White House, Ryder said, because I have no idea. A White House spokesman didn't respond to repeated inquiries about Trump's comments. That's because there's no response. He just claims it, and that's all there is to it. Trump has boasted that he's personally intervened to cut costs of 2 military aircraft, the F-35, a fighter jet built by Lockheed Martin, and now Boeing's Air Force One. They were close to signing a $4.2 billion deal to have a new Air Force One, Trump said at a rally on Saturday in Florida. Can you believe this? I said, no way. I said, I refuse to fly in a $4.2 billion airplane. I refuse. Instead, Trump said, we got that price down by over $1 billion. And I probably haven't spoken, to be honest with you, for more than an hour on the project. I got the generals in, who are fantastic. I got Boeing in, but I told Boeing it's not good enough. We're not going to do it. The price is still too high. Well, then, of course, the article goes into actual facts about Air Force One, like what it is and how much is the contract really for. All that stuff is boring. All you really need to know is there was no savings negotiated, but he's saying he did anyway. The real facts of it, of course, are always important. The program to replace Air Force One is in its early stages. It's an aging plane. I guess they regard it as an aging plane at this stage. The service, I love the way they refer to that, the service being the Air Force, is still working to refine its acquisition program baseline, the metrics needed to say how much the program may cost. They're not even at that stage yet. Ryder said Boeing is now operating under an initial $172 million contract to work on risk reduction activities, whatever that may be. The service expects to award contracts by June 30th for preliminary aircraft design and for the two unmodified 747-8 aircraft that will be adapted as Air Force One. In January, Defense Secretary James Mattis ordered a review of how to substantially reduce the program's costs. Why? It's already been substantially reduced. All right. Boeing's spokesperson said in an email, we're committed to working with the Trump administration and Defense Department on innovative approaches to affordably provide the capabilities America's military needs. The White House Military Office, not the Air Force, will set the aircraft's requirements for advanced security, communications, and accommodations, Ryder said. I'm sure he won't be doing anything to reduce the price when it comes to the accommodations. The presidential plane is a flying fortress equipped with advanced electronic countermeasures and able to refuel in midair to remain aloft in a national emergency. Its communications systems can securely place the president in contact with virtually anyone in the world and command the U.S. military, including its nuclear arsenal, while in flight. So far, the Air Force has budgeted about $1.6 billion through 2019 for the Air Force One program. It decided in 2015 to let Boeing build the jets without competition because it had the only U.S.-built passenger plane that could be adapted for the purpose. But the service said it would provide for bidding on specialized equipment such as advanced electronics and communications. So there you have it. Trump has saved more than $1 billion on a $1 billion plane. The only way that works, of course, is for him to call it a $4 billion plane. But there you go. All right. So that's where we stand with that one. There's another interesting story that I see being retweeted quite a bit from Ann Garrett, who tweets as Ann Diego. Get it, like San Diego? And ANNEDIEGO. Ann Garrett. Who is Ann Garrett? She is a video editor at Vice News, according to her profile. And she tweets this. My flight from San Francisco to JFK Airport in New York. It's a picture accompanying it. We were told we couldn't disembark without showing our, quote, documents. Oh, interesting. And Irene Carmon commenting here, what sort of documents is one expected to carry on a domestic flight? I guess at least your picture ID to get on the plane, yes, but what other sorts of documents? And the photo accompanying it is a police officer checking something just literally right outside the door of the plane in the walkway, and an Asian gentleman disembarking from the plane. And I don't know whether this is an American-born Asian American or whether this is a Chinese citizen or Japanese citizen. I've got no idea on what pretense they're checking the guy's documents, but I mean, you're pretty much checked on your way into the plane, and then once it starts flying, there's really no way for people to get on and off until it lands. I'm not really sure why they don't trust what was done in San Francisco, but it's troublesome, to say the least. I also see that Jesse Singal, the writer for New York Magazine, is also commenting on it. He says, this is great for the economy and for having a smooth functioning country overall. Let's give more power to unaccountable government agents. Tongue-in-cheek, of course, but yeah, actually one of the major functions of having a unified market and political unit of a country, you don't really need to show papers for interstate travel, but I guess now we should. And everyone will be looking forward to having it take a lot longer to get off a plane now. Won't that just make everyone so happy each day. Okay. Let's see. On to other subjects. Let's see. Are there a few other things that I may have put aside? I don't know. We'll go over to Pocket. There's a lot to choose from. As I mentioned, lots of yelling about Sebastian Gorka. I do have the Newsweek piece here, and I thought we might take a look at this. But where should we go here? We had that one. We had the Washington Post piece about Gorka. A lot of hits on Gorka lately. By the way, speaking of reports from all over the country, I did get a pointer the other day from our own good friend Arliss Bunny, who writes, by the way, at Daily Kos under the handle of BunnyGirl60. I know, that's very cute. We all have our own. I still go, the show's named for my silly handle, right? But just in case if you were ever wondering and you were wandering around Daily Kos saying, I keep looking for Arliss Bunny and I can't find her. Well, you'll find her and you'll recognize the Daily Kos avatar as the same as her Twitter avatar, and you'll know you've hit on the right person here. But here is a pointer to her diary of Tuesday, February 21st, a Where's Waldo themed town hall. This is an interesting piece about the town halls going on in her neck of the woods, one of the smallest counties in the nation. Is smallest population-wise, I guess. 6,128 folks in the whole county. In Ohio County, Indiana. And probably the reason for the small population, confusion. I don't understand. It's Ohio County, but it's in Indiana. I'm so confused. Well, it happens a lot, of course. It's these rivers, damn it, and the way that people, they wander all over the place. They have no respect for what state they're supposed to stay. It's Ohio River. Get thee to Ohio. Anyway, one of the smallest counties in the nation, Ohio County in Indiana, is joining with neighboring Dearborn County, which belongs in the state of Dearborn, as you know, to host a constituents town hall with a difference. This is what's happening in areas where members of Congress refuse to hold town hall meetings. Constituents say, well, the hell with it. We'll hold one ourselves. That's a sign of danger for those of you refusing to hold your town hall meetings. Okay? Anyway, they say there is a difference here, Arliss Bunny writes, because we are not using all of the resistance recess materials. We are not allowed to sign up with them to publicize our event, but I thought the Daily Kos community would want to know what we're doing, right? Okay, you understand what's going on here? It's because it's not organized by a member of Congress and an official town hall at which a member of Congress is expected to appear, it's hard to publicize even among resistance-minded folks, because they're, of course, looking for a list of places where your members of Congress will be showing up so that you can confront them and express yourself to them. What if your member of Congress refuses to hold one? Are you excluded from organizing the resistance? Well, you ought not to be. So Arliss is doing this instead, and I think it's a great idea. Our newly elected first-term Senator Todd Young, a Republican, and our Congressman Luke Messer from Indiana's 6th District, a member of the Republican House leadership, in fact, well, geez, they're not available at any public events during the recess. So we decided to hold an event designed to produce a small but rich media package that we can send out, including video, audio, photo documentation, and a couple of pre-written articles, the latter, for our local press. While we would love to focus on the Affordable Care Act, immigration, and the SCOTUS nominee, as directed by Resistance Recess, the hashtag, that is, those aren't the issues that will drive our local communities. We have decided to focus on the Affordable Care Act, Social Security and Medicare, the heroin epidemic, and charter schools. These are issues with enormous resonance in our area right now, and we determined that creating local energy and demonstrating that we're listening took precedence over the pre-digested questions and materials being put out by national level groups. And I think, why not? Sounds pretty wise. And I betcha that some of those nationally organized groups would say, absolutely. This, at most, we're giving you guidelines for if you feel like you're not creative enough to do the organizing it takes locally to become part of the national network. We can help you with that. But if you do feel like you're capable of doing that organizing, by all means do it. Organic, better. We also thought, she writes, if at all possible, we wanted to attract the attention of larger coastal media, so we thought about what might set our event apart. Toward that end, we are having a themed town hall using the well-known character Waldo from the Where's Waldo series of books. Because, of course, these two guys aren't showing up anywhere, right? We are creating life-size Todd Waldo Young and Luke Waldo Messer cutouts, which will be freestanding. Attendees will be encouraged to take selfies with Todd and Luke and post them widely. One is, in fact, included here. Additionally, before each of our planned questions, we have a call and response plan that goes something like this. A moderator says, Congressman Messer, we would love to have asked you this next question in person, but, and a helper holding up the cue card, and they say, where's Luke? The moderator answers, well, Luke isn't here, but we're going to ask anyway, and then asks one of our questions, calls upon one or two people from the crowd to tell their personal story relating to the subject of the question. Each person telling a story has about 90 seconds. Got to keep it brief to keep the news folks interested. It's true. One of the members of their group is sewing red and white scarves, and they'll have a couple of other surprises in store. All of this will take place on the steps of the Ohio County Courthouse in Little Rising Sun, Indiana. Population 2,304. It's a charming building. You can take a look at a picture of it here. The courthouse, built in 1845, is the oldest continuing operating courthouse in Indiana. They selected it as their site because it's lovely, and I agree, and I think I even might have used that word. I said charming, sorry. And conveys small-town Midwestern America in a way that words cannot. Or at least it would take about 1,000 words to convey what this picture does. So I'm told. That's the exchange rate that I know about. Our event takes place, if you're interested, in making your way to Ohio County. 1 p.m. Sunday, February 26th. That's this coming Sunday. We invite anyone in the area to join us who wants to laugh and express their concern in a peaceful, respectful, lawful manner. We're for all of that stuff. For anyone interested, this is the text of the press release they sent out. Dearborn in Ohio County, Indiana. Datelined February 20th. A group of local Indiana District 6 voters want to attend town hall meetings with their elected representatives, Senator Todd Young and Congressman Luke Messer. The problem is that Young and Messer are very difficult to find. Where's Todd? Where's Luke? Wonder Rebecca Barhorst and Tricia Gostad, co-chairs of the Where's Waldo themed constituents town hall. The event is scheduled for February 26th on Sunday, 1 p.m. in front of the Ohio County Courthouse in Rising Sun, Indiana. Our elected officials represent all of us, but during this recess they appear only to be listening to one side, said Barhorst. Our stories are personal. We're worried about important life-altering issues. We deserve, at the very least, to be heard, added Gostad. Event organizers plan to ask questions of their missing representatives and will invite attendees to share how proposed changes will affect them and their families. I like it. And there's even a poll afterwards. Do you think it's important for all individual events to be the same? Good question. Yes, I think a unified, focused response is essential. I think it's a good idea. I think it's fun. I think it's useful. I think it's helpful to make resonance easier to understand. But what about these other choices? Should they partially be the same? I think working in the same general direction is important, but small differences are fine. What about this? No, I think local groups need to be sensitive to their communities and reflect that in their actions. Or whatever, I just love Waldo. It's a good question. It's secret ballot. I won't tell you how I voted. You can do the same, but if you live in an area that has a similar problem, even if it's not similar in the demographics of Ohio County, it might be something you would be interested in thinking about, and that you could take as inspiration to your next meeting of your local Democratic Party and say, we've had this problem. We're never going to get our congressman to show up in this area. He's hiding from everybody. What can we do? Well, you can go ahead without him. So there you go. I wanted to share that one with you. I thought it was a good idea, perhaps essential for those of you whose members of Congress are hiding from you. All right. What other fun things have we got here? I don't know. Fun? I don't know if that's necessarily the label I'd hang on it, but let's take a look at a bunch of things here. This one is interesting, tough, and it returns to the Milo question. And I don't really want to do that, but I read this piece, and it's kind of long. And I started reading it, and I started thinking, all right, I got the gist of it. But then I couldn't stop. And I read on. And some of it is a little disturbing. And some of it is, I feel like we've heard this before, or I knew this about these people. But then there would just be one more tidbit. I had to keep going. And so I wondered whether maybe you would enjoy hearing it too. It's in the Pacific Standard magazine, which all of a sudden has come from out of nowhere to be all over my Twitter feed. And maybe you have seen the same thing. psmag.com is how you can find them online. This is a piece by a writer named Lori Penny, who has been following the Milo college tour, I guess, and you know, just following him in general. And I really, with the Milo thing, I'm so lost on the Milo thing. I just really feel like I have to depend on other people's expertise on this. And I had hoped to make that clear the other day in reading the Nora Reed thread, and I think I still haven't really fully given up the ghost on grasping this myself. But and as a result, I think, at least according to some commenters, I still really haven't let go entirely of, I don't know what, the ego, I guess. That, I want to be able to understand this. I hate when I don't understand stuff. I like to, that's my whole thing, is I want to be able to understand whatever's going on. And, what can you do? No one human being is going to be able to grasp the nuance of everything. And that doesn't mean that you say, well, I'm not going to because, hey, I don't have the capacity to follow everything. Well, I am interested in the Milo thing despite it all, I guess. And so why not just simply say there are many more people who have a much better idea of what's going on, and let's just hand them our proxy on this. I trust these guys. I understand what they're saying when they explain it. And, so they know better than I do. Fantastic. Nothing wrong with that. So, I don't know. It's still tough to admit, hey, I didn't get this. I missed this. This seems important and I didn't pay attention to it. And, you want to defend yourself to a certain extent by saying, well, I didn't dismiss it because I don't care about misogyny. It was just, I don't know. It's just one of many things that I couldn't pay attention to, but I would like to, if it can be presented in a way that can make it understandable for me, I would want to share it. So here's another one. Lori Penny writes, on the Milo bus with the lost boys of America's new right. I thought this just had a different angle. I want to share it. There's some language that needs to be cleaned up for radio. There's some language that I think you could probably get away with on radio, but is uncomfortable anyway. So we'll see how I read through this. We'll see what we deal with. What happens, she asks, when a movement of gamers recognizes they're not players, but pawns? Interesting, and a reminder of the growth of this garbage from out of Gamergate, which itself grew from out of other garbage before it. Anyway, this was, I thought, an interesting inside look. Have you heard the one about the boy who cried fake news? This is a story about truth and consequences. It's a story about who gets to be young and dumb and who gets held accountable. Ooh. It's also a story about how the new right exploits young men, how it preys not on their bodies, but on their emotions, on their hurts and hopes and angers and anxiety. This does sound familiar, right? Their desperate need to be a part of a big, ugly boy's own adventure. Well, I like that first part right there, the story about who gets to be young and dumb and who gets held accountable. I can already see what kind of point is coming from this and made me interested right off the bat. It's a story about how so many of us have suffered the consequences of that exploitation. And it's a story about how consequences finally came for Milo Yiannopoulos too. The worst kind of consequences for a professional troll. Consequences that nobody finds funny. Consequences that cannot be mined for fame and profit. As I write, Yiannopoulos, the fame-hungry right-wing provocateur, and everybody is, I think, rightly upset about letting him get away with being labeled a provocateur. But I don't think you'll find that Lori lets them off the hook here in totality. Anyway, where was I with this one? As I write, the fame-hungry right-wing provocateur and self-styled most dangerous supervillain on the internet, that's a quote, is fighting off accusations of having once endorsed pedophilia. And again, here I'll have to be clear about the fact that I did not see or listen to the actual comments that he made, though I've seen them now reported back, and I've seen them taken on from a number of different angles, some of which are counterintuitive in some ways for the generally progressive mind, but which are nonetheless progressive in their own right and come to a conclusion not entirely in keeping with the generalized left-leaning conclusion of, hooray, Milo Yiannopoulos may be gone forever, though nobody's shedding any tears over it. It's very interesting, and the totality of writing on it is fascinating and varied and nuanced, and I guess you could spend a week on it, but no one should ever spend a week on Milo Yiannopoulos. Individually, all these people have given him about as much thought as is necessary, but I'm still trying to inform myself. So you're coming along with me for the ride. All right. So, former friends and supporters who long tolerated his outrage mongering as childish fun are now dropping him like a red-hot turd. I've never seen one get that hot before, but I get the picture. His book deal has been canceled. CPAC has disinvited him as a speaker, and today he resigned from his job at Breitbart. I've been following Yiannopoulos' tour for months. That's Lori Penny, of course. Did I get the name right? Yeah, Lori Penny. Just making sure. She's been following his tour for months. I have not. And she says she can absolutely confirm that he means almost nothing he says. That he will say almost anything for attention. This is very important to know about this guy, especially if you're only coming to realize who he is. And that none of that matters to those who face violence and trauma as a result of what he says. Yiannopoulos has cashed in hard on the cowardice of American conservatives, exploited their complete allergy to irony, and now it's payback time. I knew Yiannopoulos before he was Yiannopoulos. I'm not even, did he actually change his name, or am I just not understanding that is that a metaphor? I think so. And we are still not friends, because I'm not friends with anyone who puts my real friends in danger for fun and fortune. And anyway, his tour bus smells of sweaty teenage trolls. That's reason enough right there. Before this week, Yiannopoulos was a bratty, vicious court jester of the new right, who made a name for himself by saying grotesque and shocking things that he may or may not have ever believed. He does this compulsively, with no respect for the repercussions, or for the fact that a lot of people do believe what he says and act accordingly. I have never in my life seen someone so obviously and emphatically asking for a smack in the mouth, and the only reason he doesn't deserve it is that he wants it too much. This really gets to what I, in the short time I've been aware of him, felt was the heart of what this guy was about. So I was taken aback, and I continued. Yiannopoulos should know full well the American tendency to take sick jokes seriously. And the reason he should know it full well is that it's the entire reason his shtick works in America when it didn't work in Britain. And I think we've mentioned in the past. I mean, essentially he's a failed internet entrepreneur who tried the startup thing over in Britain and it didn't work, and then he discovered that coming over here and being an internet troll would work to some extent and give him something to do and a way to make money. It's the entire reason hordes of teenage fans follow him from speaking event to speaking event. I had no idea. Hanging with desperate loyalty off every word that comes out of his face. This time it's backfired. This time, an ugly joke about having been taught, how do we say that, radio friendly-ish. I think I could probably just read it out because none of the words are the 7 dirty ones. But anyway, this time an ugly joke about having been taught certain techniques, oral sex techniques, by a Catholic priest fell flat, as did a selection of quotes from video debates where, in Miracle Boy's own words on Facebook, quote, "My own experiences as a victim led me to believe I could say anything I wanted to on this subject, no matter how outrageous. But I understand that my usual blend of British sarcasm, provocation, and gallows humor might have come across as flippancy, a lack of care for other victims, or worse, advocacy. I deeply regret that." Yiannopoulos protests that this time he didn't really mean it. And his words have been taken out of context, that child sex abuse is real, and that he understands that words have consequences for victims. This time, the same shtick fell flat as a burst tire on the freeway, and the pile-up is getting ugly. The reason it fell flat is that, for all that the American right likes to show off pet homosexuals to prove its modernity, it turns out that it still hates gays. Christian conservatives worldwide are still unconvinced that LGBT people deserve human rights. And the old false slurs that gay men abuse children and ignore the age of consent still hit home. Yes, now it becomes more obvious how deeply problematic this whole thing may be. It is horribly ironic that all of the disgusting nonsense Yiannopoulos has said about women, about Muslims, about transgender people, about immigrants, it is only now that the moderate right appears to have reached the limits of what it will tolerate in the name of free speech. The hypocrisy is clarion clear. This was never, in fact, about free speech at all. It was about making it okay to say racist, sexist, transphobic, and xenophobic things. About tolerating the public expression of those views right up to the point where it becomes financially unwise to do so. Those suddenly dropping Yiannopoulos are making business decisions, not a moral one. And yes, even in Donald Trump's America, there's still a difference. If that difference devours Yiannopoulos and his minions, they will find few mourners. Yiannopoulos followed the path of least resistance until suddenly it resisted. Now he knows just what it is to have the internet turn on you and take away your control of the narrative. Now the entire alt-right is realizing, in full view of a few million popcorn-munching online leftists, that they were never the new punk. They were never the suave and seductive black shirts of the new American authoritarianism. They are, at best, the brown shirts, and they're becoming less useful to their benefactors by the day. Where they were once underground, they are now an ankle-biting embarrassment to the movement they made mainstream, and they have no clue what to do next. Ooh, this is interesting, isn't it? I hope you think so. Rewind 2 weeks. It's a wet night in Berkeley, California, and Yiannopoulos is running away from the left. He was scheduled to speak at the University of California at Berkeley, but the event has been shut down. It was shut down because thousands of anti-racist and anti-fascist protesters decided that there should be no platform for what they called white supremacy. They are marching to say that free speech does not extend to hate speech, that the First Amendment should not oblige institutions to invite professional trolls to spout an auto-generated word salad of internet bigotry just for fun, and that if the institutions disagree, students and allies are entitled to throw fireworks and smash things until the trolls run away, which is exactly what happened. 5 minutes after I arrive on campus, klaxons are blaring in the event space, and the entire team on his, this is what he called it, this dangerous faggot tour, has been obliged to make what might generously be termed a tactical retreat. Police in full riot gear are everywhere, and the whole place is evacuated because of the real possibility of everyone inside getting a serious and arguably deserved kicking. I don't know whether she meant to say ass kicking, and I could have read that if she did, but she just said kicking. Whatever the rights and wrongs of punching fascists, if people of good faith and conscience are publicly debating whether or not you deserve a smack in the mouth, it's probably time to have a think about your life. And that's really one of the best messages of the punch a Nazi thing that I could take away. Even if you disagree, well, we can't really engage in that sort of thing, or we're no better than them. Well, I probably have some differences with you about that. But in addition, I'll say this, I think I agree here, right? If the public is debating, if people of good faith and conscience are publicly debating whether or not you deserve this, yeah, maybe it's time to sit down and think. The team is mostly composed of young men. That is the Milo Yiannopoulos tour team. Extremely young men. The sort of young men who are very brave behind a computer screen and like to think of themselves as stalwart fighters for the all-American right to say whatever disgusting thing they please, but who are absolutely unequipped to deal with any suggestion of real-world consequences. I end up spending most of my time stuck in a hotel lobby interviewing the people who follow Yiannopoulos around, doing his grunt work and getting into scrapes as if the whole thing were a holiday lark rather than a serious political project with real repercussions for real human beings. She's painting a really vibrant picture of this for me, anyway. It is vital that we talk about who gets to be treated like a child and what that means. All of the people on Yiannopoulos' tour are over 18 and legally responsible for their actions. They are also young, terribly young. Young in a way that only privileged young men really get to be young in America, where your race, sex, and class determine whether and if you ever get to be a stupid kid or a kid at all. This is great intersectionality here. Mike Brown was also 18, the same age as the Yiannopoulos posse, when he was killed by police in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014. Newspaper reports described him as an adult and insisted that the teenager was, quote, no angel, as if that justified what was done to him. Tamir Rice, just 12 years old when he was shot and killed in Cleveland for playing with a toy gun. The boys following Yiannopoulos are playing with a toy dictator, and they have faced no consequences as yet, even though it turns out that their plastic play fascism is, in fact, fully loaded and ready for murder. Yow. As the evacuation gets going, the young men in Yiannopoulos' gang seem scared. They're right to be. These protesters aren't playing, and there has already been real violence at these events. 1 week earlier in Seattle, a Yiannopoulos fan shot an anti-fascist protester in the stomach. The victim is expected to survive. The impression that this is all an exciting adventure in pranking the left, a giddy game of harmless offense where nobody actually gets hurt, is not holding up so well. Over the next few hours, I get to watch Yiannopoulos' teenage entourage wrestle with the fact that this game is, in fact, deadly earnest, and the win conditions are changing, and they are not players, but pieces on the board. The vehemence of the protests and the headline-baiting images of masked men setting fires and breaking glass represent a small win for Yiannopoulos. He gets to go on Fox News and play the victim. The rest of the crew are purely freaked out. One of the younger hangers-on has an anxiety disorder and had to fight down a panic attack that could have held up the swift retreat, a.k.a. a snowflake, right? For them. Whatever anyone claims, it's hard to shake off being run out of town by 3,000 people screaming that you're a Nazi. It's the sort of thing that gives everyone but the coldest sociopath at least a little pause. And most of this crew don't have the gumption or street smarts to function outside of a Reddit forum. They're not the flint-eyed skinheads that many anti-fascists are used to fighting. I'm not a brawler, but I'd wager these kids could be knocked down with a well-aimed stack of explanatory pamphlets, thus resolving decades of debate about whether it's better to punch or reason with racists. I wasn't supposed to be here. I came expecting to report on both sides of the line, talking to Yiannopoulos and his gang, as well as the protesters. I was hustled in past police barricades with 3 wide-eyed young event volunteers to thunderous cries of shame from the crowd. They'd no reason to know that I wasn't the volunteer myself. When the evacuation bell sounds in the stifling green room, the bravado rapidly dissolves into panic as the team heads through a maze of corridors to the car park. One look at what's happening outside tells me that if I value my bodily integrity, I'd better go with them. Yiannopoulos' tour manager, one of the few actual adults on the team along with the security guards, drives us at seat-grabbing speed through the California dark to Fremont. He asks me to treat anything I might hear in the car as off-record, given the mad scramble to evacuate, but he needn't have bothered. Most of the 45-minute journey passes in horrified silence as everyone listens to Fox News or scans their phones for video feeds of masked protesters tearing up the building we just left. From time to time, somebody says a four-letter word. And there's an asterisk here, but I don't know what it leads to. I mean, if it's down at the bottom of this article, I got a ways to go. Yiannopoulos' entourage is exclusively male, by the way. Apart from the trainer, the tour manager, and the security staff, they are all under 20, the trainer. All right? They're all under 20 and almost all painfully straight. Yiannopoulos has at least a decade on most of them, and he functions as part mentor, part employer. If Yiannopoulos has friends, he doesn't travel with them. I know you're wondering, so I'll say it. I'm as sure as I can be that he's not sleeping with any of these young men. That's not what they're here for. I think a lot of people in this crew wouldn't be part of the popular crowd without the Trump movement, says one young man who is Yiannopoulos' voiceover artist. Listen to the entourage he's put together here. I think that some of us are outcasts. Some of us are kind of weird. It's a motley crew. We arrive in the blank sun space of a Marriott hotel lobby, and Yiannopoulos immediately disappears to his room to do interviews. I'm left in the company of the Lost Boys, and I find myself feeling rather as I did half a lifetime ago, when I was the only girl in my Dungeons and Dragons group. And the mere fact of being a real living female made me not much less miraculous than a real living unicorn. Will it be friends with us? What should we feed it? Do you think if we're really nice to us, it'll give us a ride? Don't be stupid, Brendan. These things are dangerous. Offer it a beer and don't blink. Okay, just setting the scene. These young men seem to have no conception of the consequences of allying yourself publicly with the far right, even before their hero gets accused of endorsing pedophilia in public. Yiannopoulos has been good to them. They're having a great time. Over the course of a few hours, I find myself playing an awkward Wendy to these lackluster Lost Boys as I watch them wrestle with the moral challenge of actually goddamn growing up. I enjoy most respectful conversation, and these boys are scrupulously polite to me. They were polite to me a month earlier when I slept on their tour bus, right until a door closed between me and them, and they immediately started talking loudly to each other about the crass and anatomically implausible things they wanted to do to me. Isn't that interesting? That the door closes? She explains it. Intellectually, they must have known that I could hear them, but these kids grew up on the internet. The world's locker room. There's that phrase again, locker room, where if you can't see a woman, she doesn't really exist. The one grown man on the bus started yelling at them to go the hell to sleep. There's a girl back there. And they yelled back, and here we have to manipulate the text a little bit here. They yelled back that they'd let me sleep if I let them. Well, I guess we should just read it. I mean, who knows who will be offended by this one. They yelled back that they'd let me sleep if I'd let them, quote, suck my titties, unquote. Wow. It's no surprise to hear that they're still yearning for the teat. I thought that was well dealt with. But these babies had best be careful where they go slobbering for the milk of human kindness. I'm just about dried up. I don't even know what to say. But that had to be read, I think. This is the kind of person you're dealing with. Polite face-to-face, the door closes, they know you can hear it, and they're jockeying to, out-shock jock one another. Well, let her sleep if. Oh, my God. And they're now, the older versions of these guys are being placed in the White House to handle national security. This is the culture from which they draw their Sebastian Gorkas, their Steve Bannons, their Stephen Millers. Some of them are not that far removed from the same age. Amazing. I'll continue. There has been a churn in the ranks since the last time I met them, as some fall out of favor and others join. The major difference, though, is that since Trump's inauguration, they're having a lot less fun. Yiannopoulos' tour has unquestionably been the greatest adventure of most of their lives, but on this last night of the adventure, there's no rap party underway, no victory blowout, no sense of victory at all. These are not the scheming crypto-fascist masterminds I was led to expect. Seabass is 18 years old, going on 12, Argentinian, and the sort of person who thinks that sea bass is a pretty cool fish to call yourself after if your mother named you Sebastian. His mother was worried about him palling around with Yiannopoulos because he's gay, and she's always saying how handsome I am. But apparently calmed down after seeing how much Yiannopoulos has helped her son, fixing him up with connections and equipment to produce video and photos. Seabass is the one person who seems entirely unaffected by the full-on riot we've just run away from, but Seabass has had several root beers and 2 Magnums, the ice cream, and is on too much of a sugar bender to care about anything. I ask him how he sees his future. I've been asking this of everyone I met in the scream room of Trumplandia. I want to make a lot of money, get married, he says, thoughtfully. And then I want to kill God. Just couldn't just be serious even for a second. I gotta say something outrageous. I'll kill God. All right. Root beers. Several root beers. Look out. Well, as Ron Burgundy once observed, that escalated quickly. In fact, a great deal seems to have escalated quickly for these profoundly weird young men. Most of them seem more than a little surprised that this has actually happened, that Trump is actually president. I voted for him because I thought it was funny, one of them tells me. I don't think that he can become a dictator like people say he can. We have too many checks and balances for that, and that's why we have checks and balances, right? He picks at the label on his beer bottle. I always tell my friends who aren't happy with Trump, the birds are going to chirp tomorrow. Even Greg told you that. The sun's going to rise. The air's going to be full of oxygen. Whatever. Cuts in another one who has a dangerously underdeveloped understanding of climate science. I have the distinct impression that none of these young men expected to win. And it is the same problem facing that rare and fortunate sheepdog who has finally, against all expectation, managed to catch that Land Rover. You are a mighty hunter. You've got the bumper in your jaws. What do you do now? Shake it to death? What they do, in fact, is have long late-night fights about whether or not gay marriage will encourage the spread of AIDS, whether Britain is already overrun by Sharia law. I assure them that it isn't. And exactly how stupid the voting public has become. I'm pretty sure Milo has 3 times the brain capacity of Donald Trump, says one young man who is aimlessly editing video of the protests. He still thinks the right-wing voters were duped, in Britain and America both. You're giving the decision to do something that is so intricate and economically complex to an entirely uninformed, uneducated populace, he opines. The day after Brexit, the most Googled thing was, what is the European Union? I think that's how Trump got, I would say, 75% of people voting for him. He made a lot of promises, but the words he was saying a lot and not saying anything. I don't think Trump knows what he's doing. What is this person doing, right? What is this person doing on board this wagon? Most of these young men are looking to build careers in media as filmmakers, newscasters, producers. Yiannopoulos mentors them, gives them advice and equipment and support and connections. That's what most of them are getting out of this deal. But many of them may now have to consider how the consequences of a known association with Trumpism might affect those careers after tomorrow, when the rush and rage of this tour is over and most of them have to go home and face their parents. These are not the just following orders kids. These are the just making my career kids. The two are functionally the same in the United States, but this feels filthier. let's revisit the not unsurprising power of shame. The terms Nazi, fascist, and white supremacist are being tossed around so freely that they might risk losing their impact if an actual authoritarian takeover were not evidently underway in a nation that calls itself free. As it is, the slur is starting to stick. Even Yiannopoulos utterly loses his S when anyone calls him a Nazi, a racist, or a white supremacist. Slow down here, because this is important. However they may bluster online, the new right and the alt-right hate being called Nazis. They've all seen too many movies for it not to matter somewhere deep down where they tell themselves the story of their own heroism. In fact, ever since Inauguration Day, the alt-right has been in a meltdown, splitting and splintering and cascading identity crises as only a formerly underground movement can when it attains power. Of course, it's not my job as a reporter to give activists advice, but if it were, I'd say, no, they're not all fascists, and not everyone reacts to being called one by changing their tune. But the strategic application of Nazi shaming works. The real pity is that conservative hypocrisy seems to work faster. It turns out that some words do hurt. You may have noticed that in this piece I have not explicitly described Yiannopoulos or the movement that made him famous as white supremacist, neo-Nazi, fascist, or racist. The main reason for that is that it has been made explicitly clear to me that were I to write such a thing, a libel suit the size of Mar-a-Lago would drop on me, and Yiannopoulos would use every trick in his surprisingly defensive playbook to prize out an apology, because that's what friends are for. He's done it to other reporters. He's not the only one. In fact, a defining feature of the new right populists is their ability to build a reputation as rhino-hided truth-sayers, while flailing their hands in panic if anyone uses whatever words happen to hit them where it hurts. So, for legal reasons, I must state that Milo Yiannopoulos, possibly alone among all the smug white people in the world, is not a racist. For moral reasons, however, I must state that Yiannopoulos' personal beliefs are irrelevant, given that he's built a career off peddling bigotry in public. What about sexism? Sexism I don't have the energy to wrestle with you over, says Yiannopoulos, who I can personally confirm is the maple-cured bacon of misogynist piggery. Oily and sweet and crass and, on a gut level, dreadful for your health. It seems perfunctory to point out the hypocrisy of building a movement and a career on the back of insulting people. Muslims, migrants, women, people of color, while nursing a hair-trigger sensitivity to any personal attack you haven't pre-approved. That hypocrisy, though, does not appear self-evident to anyone within this movement, because a fundamental tenet of far-right pro-trolling is that it's only other people's feelings that are frivolous. Their own feelings, by contrast, including the capacity to feel shame when they're held accountable for their actions, are so momentous that infringing them is tantamount to censure, practically fascism in and of itself. These are men, in short, who have founded an entire movement on the basis of refusing to handle their emotions like adults. Many of them don't agree with what Yiannopoulos says, let alone what Trump says. They agree with the way he says it, because their life experience does not extend beyond interpreting being criticized as censorship. Yiannopoulos' brand is all about F your feelings. But the kids following him around are nothing but feelings. I have empathy for fragility. What frightens me most is the feeling that the only way to deal with the new right is to treat them as monsters, when it is precisely their idiot humanity, precisely the fact that they are fundamentally decent kids who have done fundamentally despicable things, that makes them dangerous. Over the course of these hours, the boys start telling me how they got lost. I hear stories of strict religious parents, sexual misadventures, a feeling of drifting in a world which has not offered them a clear way to be heroes. A desperate longing for something to belong to, for adventure and friends and enemies to fight. It would be adorable if it weren't fundamentally chilling. They are wedded to a political analysis that might as well be written in fuzzy felt. I'm not sure how you can be a feminist and want more refugees, one of them tells me, because of the way they treat women. It's almost enough to make you feel sorry for them. That almost is important. There are many uses for empathy. To point out that the people who join this far-right movement are damaged and hurt is not to minimize the hurt and damage they themselves are doing. On the contrary, the pain is the point. Stripped down to its essentials, the new far-right is an ideological vacuum calcified in a carapace of pain. Hurt people hurt people. That's nothing new. These hurt people are hurting other people deliberately in order to upcycle their uncomfortable emotions, reselling the pain they can't bear to look at as a noble political crusade. In I Am Not Your Negro, the recent James Baldwin documentary, there's a voiceover reading of Baldwin's observation about the weaponized immaturity of American heroism. It's quoted here, "I have always been struck in America by an emotional poverty so bottomless and a terror of human life, of human touch. A young white revolutionary remains, in general, far more romantic than a black one. White people have managed to get through entire lifetimes in this euphoric state, but black people have not been so lucky. A black man who sees the world the way John Wayne, for example, sees it, would not be an eccentric patriot, but a raving maniac. One of the results of this is that immaturity is taken to be a virtue too, so that someone like John Wayne, who spent most of his time on screen admonishing Indians, was in no necessity to grow up. Yes, these little boys are playing games with the lives of others. That doesn't excuse the horror of the game for 1 second. It makes it worse. Much worse, in fact. They are children who have the privilege of that particular innocence that involves never learning from their mistakes, never taking responsibility, never worrying that their sins will be unforgiven. In the Peter Pan stories, Peter and the Lost Boys remain children by deliberately forgetting all their adventures, including the ones where they hunted all those Indians. These boys will be allowed to forget everything but their own immediate feelings for as long as society allows them, and this society allows straight white boys to dodge personal and emotional responsibility until at least the age of 70. You know who's 70. The current man-child president would be Exhibit A, but not every lost boy gets a golden throne. In this culture war, most of them are cannon fodder. I don't believe that Yiannopoulos endorses pedophilia. I do believe that he exploits vulnerable young men. Not in a sexual way, not in an illegal way. Yiannopoulos exploits vulnerable young men in the same way that every wingnut, right-wing shock jock from the president down has been exploiting them for years, by whipping up the fear and frustration of angry young men and boys who would rather burn down the world than learn to live in it like adults, by directing that affectless rage in service to their own fame and power. This is the sort of exploitation the entire conservative sphere is entirely comfortable with. What happens to these kids now that the game has changed? Whether or not these kids deserve a second chance matters far less than whether the rest of us can afford not to give them one. There are millions of them, after all, and not all of them have the strength of character to recognize their wrongdoing and make amends. They are, however, coming to see their mistake. Some part of them believe that this was a game that would end when Trump became president. That was the big boss, the ultimate defeat of liberal social justice snowflakery. But guess what? You don't get to check out at this level and quit the game and go back and cuddle your cat. Politics is a whole different kind of game, and the stakes are real, and there are no non-player characters. The reason the Lost Boys allow themselves to be stolen away to Neverland is that they want to live somewhere they will never have to grow up. By coincidence, that's also the reason that a great many people voted to place a spray-tanned authoritarian in the Oval Office. Remember, though, that only Peter rules Neverland. What happens to the Lost Boys in the story if they ever start to build memories and change? If they ever started to become adults? They skipped this bit in the Disney movie, but in the books, Peter kills them. If Yiannopoulos is as screwed as he seems, the left has little to celebrate in the manner of the defeat. He has been brought down, after all, by the one weapon we didn't want to give power to. He has been brought down not by reasoned liberal argument, nor by moral victory over his cod theories, nor by anti-fascist agitation. He has been brought down by conservative moral outrage. Specifically, by conservative moral outrage over gay male sexuality. I can think of nobody on earth who more richly deserves to be humbled and held accountable. I just wanted my team to be the ones to do it. Very interesting and a good point. Delicious as you might find it to see karma come for Yiannopoulos, what he actually said about gay relationships and child molestation was less offensive than a great many bigoted things he has come out with, in part because, for once, it seemed just a little bit true to his experience. When he spoke about consenting relationships between adult men, where there's a large age gap, he was talking about something that is a real and meaningful part of romantic experience for a lot of gay men, and something that American conservatives seem to have no problem with when the participants are heterosexual, or indeed presidential candidates. His mangled age of consent comments and crass priest jokes are a bridge too far, especially for the conservative mainstream, which has, so far, held performative racism, transphobia, sexism, and xenophobia as well within the bounds of free speech. Today, absolutely nobody, from his publishers to his former tour promoter, is defending Yiannopoulos' right to consequence-free speech. This is not liberalism winning the day. This is the victorious far right purging the brown shirts. Professional trolling is a perilous profession in a country where people take your BS seriously. The best thing Yiannopoulos could possibly do now is go and live quietly somewhere. He can have a think about the damage he's done, and he'll be allowed to do that if he wants, because those are the sort of consequences personable white men face in America today, when and if they ever get over themselves. Seriously, though, I asked him by text on Inauguration Day, if you had a choice, if you could live A, in a world of total Trump victory on the condition of never being famous at all, or B, partial Trump-light victory and slightly famous, or C, total liberal victory and hugely famous, which one would you pick? Can you guess? You've probably already guessed. C, he replied seconds later. I'm a fighter, not a lover. As of today, Milo Yiannopoulos no longer has the luxury of that choice. His fall from grace has collapsed not just the cult of personality he built around the emptiness inside himself, but also the entire edifice of conservative self-deception around free speech. They can take down Yiannopoulos, and they must, but they can't do it without proving to the entire world that this was never about the First Amendment. It was about plausible deniability for weaponized prejudice, and that alibi has just vanished. The truth is that the new right never had any interest in principles of freedom. The truth is that Yiannopoulos was always a weak joke under a bad bleach job. The truth is that Peter Pan was never a folk hero, but a malevolent man-child whose parable remains racist to the core. What will his lost boys do now that they have outlived their usefulness? Somebody might offer them a teat to run back to, but it won't be me. I'm done. That whining noise you can hear is a string symphony of the world's tiniest violins, and I think they're playing Wagner. Rather amazing. And I thought a very vivid portrait of what she thought was going on behind the scenes among these weird kids. I thought it helped me understand a little bit, but who knows? I'm sure there's criticism coming, but have I spent too much time on it? I don't know. I feel like I understand it a little bit more right at the end here as it collapses. Maybe it's not too late to understand this. Maybe it's best if we understand it so that we don't let it rise again, but I assume we eventually will. All right, a couple other things to squeeze in here before we hand things over to the guys on the after show today. One thing that has been lingering for a long time, but I never got around to reading into the record. And I think people are coming to this realization rather slowly. But if you haven't spotted it yet, I'll put it on the record for you. You've seen the California secession stuff post-election. You know, the country sucks. Trump's a joke. California wants to go its own direction, wishes it could go its own direction, is the size that deserves to go its own direction. Maybe we should. Maybe we leave. Maybe California secedes and becomes a Democratic Party-ruled liberal haven, separate from the rest of the United States. Oh, of course. Gee whiz. Does that bode well for the rest of us? No, of course not. And our superpower status, of course, I think largely depends on our remaining unified. But you can see the appeal of separating yourself from Trumpism, right? No doubt that's easy enough to spot. Of course, who really benefits from, if there really was such a thing as secession from the Union for California? Californians might think they benefit right off the bat in terms of separating themselves from Trump, but ultimately it creates enormous problems for everybody inside and out of California, and particularly for the rest of the country. So it might not come as a surprise to you to learn that the California secession advocate, the guy leading the charge online, the headline in the New York Times tells us, faces scrutiny over where he's based. Hey, you'll never guess unless you already know, and the answer is Russia. What? Why would you be for California secession if you were based in Russia? Holy crap. Apparently some people either didn't know that or, for whatever reason, don't care, I guess. But, wow, if you didn't know, it's time to figure it out. I didn't know until I saw it reported, and I still didn't manage to get it on the record. Anyway, an interesting piece. Won't have time to read through it, but I'll share it with you. And there are many more where that came from. I think it's probably wise to take note of the fact that as much fun as it would feel like to secede from the Union successfully and be able to point to the disaster of Donald Trump as the reason for it, well, there's a bigger game afoot, and you should be aware of it. Okay, let's see, what other things can we squeeze in before closing things out? There's an interesting report and something probably we ought to discuss, perhaps give some more time to. But on the emoluments front, and perhaps something therefore we can discuss maybe with Armando if he's got some time tomorrow, one of the latest of the entries in the foreign emoluments problem for Donald Trump, the trademark granted to him by the Chinese government, one he's been pursuing for years and has had, to this point, no hope of securing. A trademark in his own name so that he can make the most of, capture all the profits that come from Trump branding of buildings planned for construction in China. And apparently the Chinese government had to override and essentially violate its own standing law on trademarks in order to make this grant to Trump. And it pretty clearly puts it, let's say, under suspicion as an improper emolument, and a grant of a special favor to the United States president who happens not to have let go of his commercial interests around the world. Well worth noting and exploring perhaps a little bit at a later date. Let's see, a few other fun things that we might mention. Let's see, anything else? Well, there's lots more that we need to catch up on. Perhaps tomorrow will be the day for catching up on the latest in the development of the storyline about Felix Sater and the Kazakh money that finances his operations. And let's see, any others? Not that I think we'll be able to squeak in here at this point. But at any rate, I think well worth the time that we spent on, I hope, wrapping up our attention to Milo Yiannopoulos and his antics. It's it's been a long time coming, catching up in those things, but I've become, I think better educated on some of this, and I hope you have as well. I hope I didn't bore you to death on these things. And feels like we may only be catching up at the very end of the storyline on Yiannopoulos, but we should be so lucky that it's the end of the storyline in this guy. All right. One other thing that I think we'll at least note for the record, though we obviously can't get to today, all the reporting we've been seeing and sharing on Cambridge Analytica sort of called into question here by a BuzzFeed piece. Of course, the last couple of months, every once in a while, we get one of these pieces that says how incredibly sophisticated and incredibly dangerous what they've been able to do with political psychographics really is. Well, a contrary look at this from BuzzFeed, the truth about the Trump data team that people are freaking out about. Let's save that one for discussion. I hope we'll get around to it tomorrow. I just want to give you that headline and subheader. Cambridge Analytica says its behavioral communications techniques helped land Trump in the White House. Don't believe it, say former campaign staffers, employees, and other Republican digital strategists. You get a lot of snake oil in this area of data work, one said. But on the other hand, we got a note for the record that it turns out that one of the 6 employees of the White House recently fired from their jobs and escorted from the building after failing their background checks. We mentioned one of them the other day who was the daughter of a big-time Florida politico, right? We also find out that the White House digital director, formerly the RNC digital director, was among their number. And somewhere we have that article handy. I'll provide it to you, of course, in the roundup. But suffice to say, well, an amazing thing. And gee whiz, that the people dealing with the digital side of things turned out not to have been able to manage their own security clearance. Well, it's not the tech director. It's not the person who is supposed to keep the White House or the RNC from being hacked. But you'd think they'd be a little bit more savvy to those things. Amazingly, he doesn't pass the background check. And he's out. And the administration continues to crumble from the inside. Anyway, time, like I said, to hand things over to the guys at the after show. And I'll tell you what's coming up next on Thursday's episode. That means it's, thank God, it's giovedì. The Italian having been taken care of and dispensed with, we move on. An Immigration and Customs Enforcement detainee being prepped for surgery to remove a brain tumor is removed from the hospital and returned to her detention center. The White House admits the new Muslim ban will be the same as the old Muslim ban, and deporting all undocumented immigrants could cost the economy trillions of dollars. Wow. Relevant once again, a piece we recorded on this way back in May.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
That piece I'm referring to, something I recorded way back when for a pre-recorded show and then decided I couldn't fit. I thought it would never be relevant again, and I guess it is. We'll have to examine those costs. On the last half, they'll be reporting that Chief Justice John Roberts has finally found an example of racism that even he won't tolerate. Find out what that's all about coming up next.